Hi, friends. Lee Brickey and Brent from the United Lending and I have been getting a lot of questions from our clients, buyers and sellers, if this election has any bearing over the real estate market. And if it does, what could the president in Washington, D.C. do to help that? So that's what we're talking about today in the video. And we're bringing Brent Starts, our good friend from United Lending, on to talk with us on it. But a trigger warning I would like to put out before we start this video. This is not a political video. This has no political bias either for the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. This is just what we are seeing on the ground, what we're seeing in the market right now, and then also what experts are saying could help the real estate market and could hurt the real estate market. And also, we're going to talk to you about what the local municipalities, towns, and cities can do that would really help this supply and demand problem we're dealing with right now in real estate, which is causing prices to stay high and also making it very difficult for people to find the right home. But before we get started, if you're interested in real estate anywhere between the Treasure Coast and Palm Beach County, or you're interested in relevant real estate news and updates with no bias, then you're going to want to subscribe to this channel. So go ahead and slap that subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our real estate tips and tours. And with that said, let's bring on our good friend Brent Starks from United Lending. Hey, Brent. So let's get into it today. Real quick before we get started, the Federal Reserve. A lot of folks think that the Federal Reserve is at the pleasure of the president in D.C. And really, the presidency has nothing to do with the Fed. It's their oversight is from Congress. But why don't you break down real quick how the Fed works for folks here and how they work monetary policy and what's their biggest interest, and does the presidency in Washington have any effect, if all, on the Fed these days?
That's a great question, Lee. With so much emphasis on the political environment, let's cover it. Yes, actually the president does nominate the Fed governors. Okay, so he does nominate them. The 8 voting members of the Fed that vote. However, they're confirmed by the Senate. Okay, so and they carry 14-year terms. So both Democrats and Republicans have presidencies in place and Senate majorities and things like that. So really, it's a pretty even mix as far as the Fed governors that are on the voting portion of the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee, and that's who actually votes for Fed hikes or cuts as far as interest rates. Okay, so let's be clear on that. So it's really pretty a non-event actually as far as politically, because they have to answer to what's called a dual mandate. So the Fed, what they do is in times of recession, in other words, employment's faltering, they'll lower rates to to stir up the economy, to get things going. And then the other part of the mandate is to watch for inflation. Okay, so their second part of their mandate is price stability. So when we see inflation take off, like we did after COVID, and with all that, the reduction in interest rates that caused inflation, actually, that's the other side of the spectrum. So what happens is when rates need to be cut when they need to be raised is when we have the inflation scenario that we had. That slows the economy down, it slows inflation, and brings back price stability. So that dual mandate, protecting against recession and protecting against inflation, that's what they're there to do. Now, the voting governors that vote actually in the Federal Open Market Committee, they actually have district presidents that are rotated in. There's 12 districts in the Federal Reserve, and they're scattered all over the country. And those district presidents are rotated in at 4 at a time to be a part of the voting governance in the Federal Open Market Committee that actually sets interest rates. So that's actually the involvement. So not a lot of pressure that way. Pressure can be placed. I mean, they can talk about it, but they can't do anything. Yeah.
Right. So the Fed's on its own. I mean,
right.
they get some, they'll get little bit of pressure or advice from politics or politicians, but they ultimately make the decision. And we saw that with, Jay Powell just cranking rates up, and nobody likes that, especially if you're running for president or office in Congress or the Senate. So it's
the president wants to have that punch bowl rolled out. They don't like to pull it back, right? They want to see good times and people spending money and easy access to credit. And that's
right.
what, that's why they tend to pressure that. However,
in some recessions, in some inflation is caused by just overheating markets. Things are going really, really well, and then all of a sudden markets start to overheat, and then we see, it just kind of a cycle. All right, well, let's move on to what's happening with politics right now and what's being said out there. And I want to go back in history a little bit. One of the things that the president and Congress is responsible for is helping the Fed create good fiscal policy. When Washington's out there spending money like drunken sailors, like they've been doing for years, it really makes things hard for the Fed, because they then have to balance that. So, they spend money and then they stop spending money and then they start spending money again. And it makes hard for the Fed, because the more money they print, the more inflation that happens. And so the last balanced budget, just to be fair here, was Clinton. Clinton had the last balanced budget. He actually left office with a surplus. And since then, every president we've had has increased the national debt. Now, COVID, obviously that's important because they shut everybody's lives down, their businesses, their jobs, everything. So the government had to come in and support people during that time, and the debt really rose then. But with that being said, we could have been running a balanced budget. Then that happens, and then you just work your way back into a balanced budget over the next few years, and that's not happening. And right now, one of the things that we don't see anyone talking about on either side, and this is all over the business news, and I listen to it every single day, is neither candidate are talking about balancing this budget. Trump's talking about tax cuts and more spending, but he's going to fix it by drilling oil, and maybe that may help, but you're going to have to drill a lot of oil. I mean, as you said in the past, the debt is so high that the interest is the same as our defense budget.
It's actually exceeded it recently. Yeah, it just recently exceeded it. Yeah, so the interest, imagine this.
The interest, just the interest, Yeah, not the actual debt. Let's be clear with that. So that is something that we're going to leave to our children, and that has finally, I think, caught up with us. And as the old saying, chickens have come home to roost, and it's something that I think that everybody needs to be looking at moving through this election cycle, that, we need to hear more about how, the Washington, D.C. as a whole is going to attack this balanced budget. So that's one thing. But the other thing is the government getting in the housing market, because the last time this happened, was 2008.
Right.
And 2008 was a direct result from Clinton saying that even though he balanced the budget, he wanted to have 80% home ownership. And that's a lot like what happened in the Great Depression, where they wanted 90% home ownership. And what happened after the Great Depression, and I'll just give everybody a little understanding of this, is that they hired after the Great Depression, they wanted to figure out what caused it, because it began in the financial markets. And they found that the insurance company, I'll make it simple here, the insurance companies, Wall Street, and banks were commingling money. And they brought in economist Stiegel, and he put up a glass wall between those three. You had to choose. Are you going to be, in equity markets, or are you going to be, banking, right? So when Clinton wanted this 80%, that's a very simple, simple explanation of it, but basically that's what it is. And so Clinton removed that, and there was a lot of pushback when that happened on removing that Glass-Steagall Act. And so when he removed that, we saw the banks deregulate, right? And then all of a sudden they allowed the Fed and DC allowed the banks to start offering these crazy mortgages, and you can speak more on that and what you saw there. And so
it was pretty severe too. We saw, where some of these loans were starting out at 1.99% for 1 month, and then the first adjustment was to 6 or 7%, and then it could go as high as 13 or 14. And so you had people that were literally making, $3,000 in household income buying $800,000 homes, and it was everywhere. And that's why we saw the crash. By the way, it was bad loans specifically, and we've had full doc loans now for 14 years, so. With that's not really in the cards right now, but yeah, it's set up for failure, for sure.
It crushed the American people. And we saw it for years, right? I mean, we saw it for years, pulling people's credit, finding homes that weren't on their credit, because some of these homes, they when they were foreclosing on them, it was going so fast they couldn't even put it on the credit bureaus, and then we'd run their credit. And then we'd get into the loan, and then we'd find, a house sitting out there in foreclosure through the court records, right? So,
and these loans, it was a hot potato too. These loans were packaged and repackaged and sold again and again and again. And, it was a hunt for yield. It was agreed that because, they can get a point premium or 2 points above, the market rate for, A paper mortgages. And the bond rating agencies were, calling this stuff A credit, which is just insane, because if you dig very deep, you'd see that, there are problems there for sure.
Right. So, this is where we're at now, is the Fed, held rates back at, 2.5%, 3.5% for so long.
Right.
And even 4.25%, we were seeing, for so long, 4.25%, 4.5%. We saw, inventory tighten up, but it was nothing like it is now. I mean, we have a ton of inventory right now. I mean, it's grown 50, 60% in Palm Beach County and the Treasure Coast year over year. And we're still below pre-COVID levels.
Right.
So we have a real housing shortage, and that's what we're here to talk about, is how to fix this housing shortage because of these low rates being held back for so long, and so many people now into these low rates, and the economy being what it is. A lot of folks, not only do they not want to lose that 2.5%, 3.5% mortgage, but they can't afford to if they lost that mortgage. But that flips over to other folks trying to buy homes now that can't afford to buy a home because prices are so high from lack of lack of inventory, because this is a supply and demand problem, folks. I mean,
all goes back to that. Absolutely.
Supply and demand. There's not enough supply of houses. That's why we haven't seen a crash through all of this, and prices have relatively stayed high. I mean, it's predicted that because of rates being high for the next couple of years or next year, that prices will stay flat, which is something we need. I mean, and I know you agree with this, and so does every other expert. We're not going to see rates drop below the high fives next year. So we'll have a relatively flat market, which is good, because if the economy can start to recover, it'll help people. But how do we solve this crisis we have with housing? And that's the problem. And we have Democrats and Republicans talking about their plans, and will that plan actually work? Does it have any impact at all in the market, is the question. So this article came out here in about Florida here, and it says these are the reasons right now: supply and demand, population growth here in Florida, inflation hitting record highs, renters
Mhm.
are being affected, food's being affected, homelessness is growing, and all of this is happening over this inflation and high interest rates in the market. So, you've got two different sides here, right? You have Kamala Harris coming out and saying, she's going to do a $25,000 tax credit for, first time buyers and people that, need help getting into the home. And there's
Mhm.
other parts of that but we're pushing more money into the market.
Right.
And and you can talk into this a little bit, but doesn't that just
Yeah.
create more inflation in the housing market? I mean, it just causes more
Yeah.
money to be brought into the market that basically would just go to the seller.
Right. It does two things, Lee. That's exactly right. So it's inflationary, first of all, because you're pumping money into people that frankly haven't possibly saved anything too. So there's not a fiscal responsibility type of history there typically too, if you can get in for nothing down or something like that. So there's not skin in the game either. So it does a couple things that way, psychologically. But you also have a situation where you're running up the deficit. So someone has to pay for that $25,000. So if it's released to everyone, we're kind of getting back to what caused some of the problems, by letting, just fiscal responsibilities kind of out the door. So,
Right.
and so I think that it's problematic. Now, if there are qualifiers on that, you had to match it or something like that. There's some type of skin in the game, if you will. In other words, where the borrowers were putting more down, that type of thing. They'll be more apt to stay true to that mortgage payment too, because they have something invested. So but when it's my experience is when you give somebody something for free, it sometimes doesn't work out as well as you might think. You know what I mean? So, and it
Right.
creates a deficit too. Somebody's got to pay
Right.
for it.
And Trump's, he's talking tax benefits and he's talking some grant money also
Hmm.
on his side. And the other thing is where are we building housing? So so last term, he was very much against building duplexes in communities because he felt like they would lower the property values, building low income housing in communities again because it would lower the property values of the homes in those areas. But
Hmm.
where do we go from here? If you've got a piece of land, you're ripping a house down. Why not build a nice duplex, right, in that community? And depending on the type of community, build a nice duplex on it, give a tax benefit for the builder to do that, right? So they want to do
Hmm.
more of that because we
Right.
see these, 55 and over communities, and they have duplexes mixed right in with the homes, and they're nice and they match. And
Mhm.
I'm not talking about building some multifamily housing in the middle of a nice neighborhood, but
Residential area. Right.
but right, but you have a lot of these old communities, and there's no more land, and
Hmm.
you could take some of this real estate that's in there that could be torn down. Builders can purchase it and build a
Hmm.
duplex, and now you build two houses in a community, and you build it at the level of home that community has. And
Hmm.
then we've also seen here in Florida where they've taken low income communities, right? And they've put in these beautiful uh, gated community with
Right.
50, 100 homes, and made it available for people in that community to purchase those homes at a substantial discount,
Hmm.
um, and creating low income housing, but doing it in a way that you're actually beautifying the community. You're not just like
Right.
throwing it up.
Right.
You're adding something to the community, and we've seen that all up and down South Florida in a
Right.
lot of these communities. So, I think that's something that can be done too.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the danger, the only, speaking to the hesitancy of some local communities to build, you have that pushback because some communities are completely built out. It's like, hey, we don't want to see, 8-story, residential, homes or,
Yeah, but
apartments.
that's not what I'm talking about.
That's
I'm
what we're
talking
talking
about a nice duplex,
Right.
right?
Right.
In a community where it can take. I mean, let's take Martin County for example. And I don't want to get anybody get mad at me here, but
It's all right.
Martin County could use some beautification, right? I mean,
Right.
it needs to be updated, and
Mhm.
they're allowing these builders to come in and stick these townhome communities like right in the middle of something. I mean, it's like like right in the middle, like right next to a grocery store, and there's commercial buildings all around it, and then you got this townhouse community in there, and they sell it out, right?
Right.
But instead of doing that, they're fighting Newfield for it took 13 years to put a deal together to
Right.
build Newfield where there's nothing. It's a farm,
Right.
right? And it's going to be fantastic, and it's going to create
wonderful.
all kinds of new jobs, and they're putting 4,000 homes in there, and it's not hurting anyone. And then also you have this story being built in Martin County over in the farmland, and it's going to be a sustainable water community, and that's what Newfield is. It's going to be a sustainable farm. You're going to be able to buy your produce right there, or you can even grow your own.
Right.
So I mean, creating more community
examples of beautiful homes, like beautiful areas.
Right. I mean,
built.
Good Lord. I mean, and Bridge Road, I mean, even Lisa and I are looking at that because we'd love to build a new home exactly the way we want to. Pulte builds a great home. It's going to be a Devasta community surrounded by water. And, our thing is we've been in Jupiter for 35 years. So this is our home. We met here. We fell in love here. We raised our kids here, and, all of our friends are here. The inlet's really important to us. We spend a lot of time on the inlet, on the boat. And we have been, and fishing and diving and wakeboarding and all the things we love to do, just hanging out on the sandbar. And I don't want to lose that, right? Because this is a special place. In my opinion, Jupiter is one of the greatest places you could live. And that's why it's so stinking expensive.
Right.
But Bridge Road's right down the road, man. It's like 15 minutes. I can get to the beach in 15 minutes from Bridge Road. And so, me personally, I get it with Stewart and Palm City. I mean, traffic's are crazy. I come into your office is like when I want to slam my head through the window. And then also they've got all that road construction now on Cannon Highway, which make it better, but it's still is the government fighting and making it takes so long to build over in Martin County on the other side of 95. And I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, they could be saying, hey, we're going to do all this, but it sure hasn't happened. And, you saw Port St. Lucie just explode west of 95.
Right.
And it's still exploding. I mean, they're building all these communities off the Glades Cutoff Road. Mm-hmm. So, and and then people are like freaking out because it's overpopulating, but I mean, where are we putting these people?
Yeah, I think, to your point, Lee, I think one of the things that would help with that is just the, to see those areas grow up, because there's certainly demand. Like, where are you going to put these folks? And it's not developed land yet. Like you say, it's farmland. So why not take some of the regulation out of the picture where, over $100,000 per unit in California, for example. I know it's been well over 100,000 for years, frankly. Just for regulations, just to cut through the red tape. Why don't
you can't even break ground.
Right.
You can't even break ground in California.
Right.
For less than $100,000. I mean, before you even break ground, you've got to do everything. And then they threw all these mansion taxes on to tax the rich, but they didn't exclude builders. So now there's no building going on there. It's so expensive to build a home that you have to build such an expensive home. There's not enough people in the market for it. Mm-hmm. And so it's already so expensive. And now you're seeing people, move from Northern California to Southern California, but then a lot of people are just starting to move out of California.
Lee,
And
I'll give you an example in California because I lived there for 23 years. So when I interviewed with a home builder out there that will remain nameless, but they had 2,000 acres and they were going to pay $4 million to transport kangaroo rats to in this endangered species. And I'm like, there's just so many strange things like that they have to do, and I'm like, my goodness, I couldn't deal with that. It's like that's
right. Well, builders can't anymore. I mean, this last year, the taxes have changed dramatically, and it's gotten worse, and
Mhm.
now you've stunted growth. So let's get into that. So, what can the federal government do, right?
Mhm.
So there's a great article in here, and I got it from CBS, and it says, what can the market, what can government, what can Washington actually do? These are things that would actually help, right? And then localities can pick up where they left off, and the local government needs to move forward. But I feel like, this is, what you just said, provide tax benefits to builders who produce entry level homes. So
Yeah.
right now, folks are like, why don't builders build $200,000 and $300,000 homes? And Bill Pulte was on the Business News a few months ago, and he was talking about this, and he said, we need deregulation from the governments. We need it from the federal government, and we need it from the local governments,
Local.
and then we
Yeah.
need some tax breaks,
Mhm.
because we build $200,000 or $300,000 homes in the U.S. We break even. We don't make any money, or we
Right.
make
No
very
money.
little money, where it doesn't make sense. Where if they build more expensive homes, they make more money, right?
Right. Right.
So that's one way that this can be fixed. If the federal government would put out some federal tax breaks for builders.
Yeah. Just
Four hundred
affordable.
fifty
Not
thousand dollars at 6% is not affordable to someone making $150,000 a year. It's just not. I mean, they're going to spend
right.
half their income almost to pay that mortgage,
Right.
and
Right.
it's just not affordable. So
Right.
we have to have entry level homes. This is entry level home. I mean, you used to be able to buy a home, for $200,000-$300,000 just 5 years ago. I mean, you
Right.
could find Port St. Lucie was loaded with them.
Yeah. And I think, the points you're bringing up, those are all supply issues, right? We're going to because you can address one or two things, supply or demand. And I think, addressing supply and the things you've mentioned, Lee, are the most productive things you can do right now. Cause that's really the issue. There's not enough, there's not enough inventory. And so, and there's a tremendous backlog of households being formed, with these echo baby boomers too, kids in their 20s and 30s and even early 40s now, that have been holding off on buying because of the affordability issue. So I think that addressing that, having supply, is certainly a great strategy. The only thing that gets sticky is when the Fed is starting to meddle in local politics. Where that can get sticky, because there are
Right.
certain communities that are they're going to give pushback, like Martin County. It's an example, like anything towards
Well,
the
that's
ocean.
why the governor and the congressman need to get involved,
Right.
right? I
Right.
mean, like Brian Mast has been involved with these new communities getting built, just like he's been involved with, stopping JD Park from getting a
Oh my
golf course.
goodness.
I mean, whose
Right.
stupid idea was that?
Right.
I mean, I
Yeah.
don't want to go into that,
There's
but
other areas you can
and
build,
then,
and
like, I mean, the golf courses are failing, and you're going to build
Mhm.
golf courses in a
Mhm.
beautiful park where people paddleboard and fish
Mhm.
and canoe and bike ride. There's trails in there, and I
Mhm.
mean, it's and then it's a sanctuary
Yeah,
for Florida wildlife. I mean,
and
it's just, and
there
so
are
he
other.
fought back on that, and then he fought back on pollution in Lake Okeechobee from
Right.
the sugarcane farmers.
Right.
And manatees were dying every time they'd open that gate. It was destroying the grass, and so manatees were floating up on the top of the water, starving to death. And
Mhm.
they've been able to fix that situation. He actually
Mhm.
got Washington involved because he used social media to show how disgusting the water was. And
Yeah.
he had to fight the Army Corps of Engineers on that one to get it done. I
Right.
mean, that's how deep the corruption ran in that deal. And
I know.
so, that's something him and DeSantis have done is they've really focused on the environment. I mean, DeSantis fired everybody in the South Water District when he came in because no other governor we had before then, cared about it. They just wanted that money from the sugarcane farmers.
Right.
And not only did Brian Mast get that cleaned up with DeSantis, but he also went to Washington, D.C. and got a bill passed. So why can't we do something like that with housing?
Right.
And then here's another one: sell federal land use for housing.
Yeah. I was
So
gonna
the
say,
government owns land in every state, and it's not national parks. They just own land,
right.
right? And it's just sitting there. And Bill Pulte talked about this: is
Right.
it's just sitting there. So open that land up for builders to build homes,
create revenue, right?
Create revenue.
Housing. You're killing two birds with one stone too with it. So I agree 100%. So hands off the parks. I mean, the state parks especially. They're well established, and
But you have to make places for people to live, and a lot of this land is just sitting there. And and every state has the same thing. They have a lot of land that the government controls, and the governments aren't allowing that land to be built on, which would not affect the environment.
Right. And that's key. And like I said, it would generate revenue and at the same time help with the supply side. The demand's still there. I mean, there's just a backlog of people that want to purchase homes. You never talk people into it. I mean, there's demand, you don't necessarily want to dampen the demand either. It's home ownership is a great dream and something you want to aspire to.
Right, it's the American dream, and kids have given up on it.
Build
and
stability.
They're just spending money. They've just said, you know what, I'm just going to use my money and travel and go places, and I'm not even worried about my son. Not even worried about buying a house right now. So because until he gets married. He needs another income like his to do something, or he can't do anything. He can't go anywhere. So, and then what do we do? You mentioned this before to me. What do we do with these people who are retiring, right? And they're buying homes, but they've got these big mortgages, and then all of a sudden they're stuck on Social Security. How are they going to afford to live?
I see people all the time, $2,000, $2,200 a month, and Social Security is the plan, and they're buying a $500,000 house, and they're 58 years old. It's kind of like at some point in time, we're going to retire at 65, and I said, yeah, but how are you going to pay your mortgage? How are you going to buy food? And I think the timeline.
Well, we're dealing with it right now with one of my clients. She has 3 Down children, and 72, and she can't afford to own her home anymore. And even she did a reverse mortgage. And the good book tells us to take care of widows and orphans. So, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to help her as much as I. So here's another one I want you to break into: improving consumer access to financing for manufacturing housing. Now, we can't have a lot of manufacturing housing here because of hurricanes, but they're building these homes that are these shipping containers made out. They're metal shipping containers, and I've seen several of them. And they're really, really nice. But you can't insure them. And then other places in the country that don't get hurricanes, or they can build manufacturing housing. Talk into that about mortgage companies. I mean, this is something that the federal government can do with HUD and housing and fixing this problem.
Yeah, Lee, that's a great point. Yeah, relaxing the Fannie Freddie guidelines on unique homes, and so the container homes would fall in that category. You can purchase one, a used container that you see them on rail cars, on trains, right? They take those off, and they put doors in them and windows, and they put 3 or 4 of them together. And it's amazing how nice they can make them look. I mean, so it's affordable, and they're bulletproof. I mean, you literally, they're hurricane proof. No problem. So it's just getting them on board. Some of those unique styles. The tiny home, craze, having small homes that are built in communities, because if you've got a large swath of the population, depending on Social Security and the baby boomers going off into retirement here soon, there's got to be housing available for those folks for financial security and in physical security and having homes. And so I think that relaxing those guidelines would certainly be a huge move in the right direction, and the federal government can do that, as they've the Fannie Freddie are in still in conservatorship. So there's a strong influence there. So I think that'd be a great move in the right direction.
Right. And then eliminating tax breaks for second and third homes. What's your feeling on that one?
I think eventually it would, people would have with the benefit of holding a second and third home would wane, and so those homes would eventually come on the market. So I think it would be a partial answer. It might be over time, for those people to make that decision. It might be immediate, for some people, but it would increase the supply, right? So
Right.
that
I
that
know
would be
people don't want to hear that,
right. That's not, yeah, it's not popular,
but
but it would
but
create
it
supply.
right, it would create supply. And then what's your feeling on lowering rates? I mean, I don't think that's going to change the market at all. As a matter of fact, if we went to 4.25 again, we'd be right back in, we'd be in a terrible position. Prices would just start just skyrocketing again. So, I mean, I don't
Exactly.
think lower of an interest rates are going to do anything but raise the prices of homes and create more supply problem.
Yeah, Lee, that's a great question. The big swings, the crashing of interest rates for so long, and then raising them so fast. It's those big swings that cause weird things in the market because it's not natural. We're artificially tipping the scales, and when you put your finger on the scales, the free markets aren't making the decision. It can get out of whack, and that's what we've seen, frankly. And so I
Right.
think if I had my dream would come true, that rates would slowly go down, continue to slowly go down, and more supply would come on, and where there'd be some type of striking that balance. And that's really what needs to happen, for a solid,
Right.
because you want solid jobs. You don't want people to lose their jobs. You want strong, that jobs buy homes, essentially. You know what I mean? Because people earn money from jobs. That's how you pay
Right.
the
And the
bill.
other thing is you want to be able to see your property values go up, but
Yeah,
they can't go up as fast as they've gone up.
yeah.
And because it's good for those people, but it's terrible for the rest of the country. And then
Hmm.
also you end up with the problem we have. So, I'd like to finish this up and by saying and getting your feel on this too. I think folks really need to start getting involved with their local government, their
Yes.
municipality, their local congressmen, the senators, the governor, and really getting involved and states starting to put pressure on the federal government for help that they
Hmm.
can provide, and the federal government talking about solutions like these instead of let's throw more money at the problem, because throwing
Right.
money at the problem doesn't fix it, but
Hmm.
getting down, and that's the easy way out, right? Like if you're a giver, right, it's so easy just to write a check to your favorite charity every month, but
Hmm.
getting in your car and going to that charity and working all day in it, that takes time, right?
Right.
That's when you see things really change, because somebody's got to get on the ground. So the
Mm.
more of us who get involved with our local government, who
Yes.
understand what our politicians on a local level are doing, what they're not doing, and how they're facing this problem is going to fix it. I'll let you
I
give the
believe it.
last word.
I believe that 100%, Lee. And real estate is very local, as we know. Tradition is very different than Martin County, for example, which is very different than Palm Beach County. So the housing needs, requirements, demand, all of it's different. So each locality has probably its own solutions that will work best. However, I do believe some of the things we talked about today, just big picture, selling, releasing some federal lands that could be developed, and that type of thing. Those and relaxing regulations, any federal, from the federal standpoint, access to more financing for manufactured homes and those types of scenarios where those homes are fine in certain areas, and certainly the container homes, unique homes, that type of financing, making that available would certainly help open up the market tremendously. So I think those are kind of the best ways to do it. And then of course locally, if it makes sense for your area to get involved and look at the lands that it would be, the environmental impact would be minimal, and we could help people achieve the American dream of owning a home. So yeah, that's our 2 cents today for it.
All right,
So
man. Well, I appreciate you joining me today, and I'll see
yeah,
you in the next video, brother.
sounds good, Lee. Thanks so much.
So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and hit that like button. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. Lets us know that we're building the right kind of content. If you have any comments or questions for Brent and I, go ahead and leave those in the comment section below. And if you'd like to reach out to Brent and I, my information's right there on the screen, and Brent is in the comment in the information section below. And then if you have not subscribed to our channel, go ahead and slap that subscribe button right there. Ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our real estate tips and tours. And you can watch the next video on the market right there from Brent and I. Be kind to each other, and we'll see you in the next video.